The bus jerked to a stop so suddenly that every passenger lurched forward, hands grabbing poles, bags sliding across the floor. In that brief moment of chaos, when the city's noise poured in through the open doors and impatience hung thick in the air, one small decision quietly changed a man's life forever. No cameras, no applause, no one paying attention, just a tired single father, an empty stomach, and a choice that would ripple far beyond that crowded bus. Daniel Carter hadn't slept properly in months. The kind of exhaustion he carried didn't fade with coffee or a quick nap. It lived deep in his bones, born from late-night worries, early morning alarms, and the constant fear of not being enough. Every morning he woke before dawn to prepare breakfast, pack a lunch, and gently shake his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, awake for school. She never complained. She smiled even on the cold mornings when their tiny apartment felt colder than the streets outside. That day had started like every other, too fast and already heavy. Daniel had skipped breakfast so Lily could have an extra apple in her lunchbox. He'd tied her shoelaces with fingers stiff from the cold and promised her, as he always did, that everything would be okay. He didn't know if she believed him, but she nodded anyway, trusting him in a way that both warmed and broke his heart. After dropping Lily at school, Daniel boarded the bus toward the construction site where he worked whenever there was work to be had. His jacket was thin, the elbows worn smooth, and his boots leaked when it rained. He took an empty seat near the back, resting his head against the window as the city blurred past. Bills were overdue. Rent was coming. His phone buzzed earlier with a reminder he couldn't afford to open. At the next stop, the bus filled quickly. People squeezed in, shoulders touching, patience thinning. Then she stepped on. A woman in her late 20s, visibly pregnant, one hand on her lower back, the other gripping the pole as the bus lurched forward again. Her face was pale, strained, eyes darting as she searched for somewhere to sit. No one moved. Some stared out the windows. Others pretended not to notice, eyes glued to their phones. Daniel saw it all. He felt the familiar war inside his chest, the voice reminding him how tired he was, how his legs ached from standing all day, how badly he needed this small comfort. And then he thought of Lily, of the way she watched him, learned from him, mirrored him. Before his mind could argue any further, he stood up. He tapped the woman gently on the arm and offered his seat with a quiet smile. She looked surprised, then deeply relieved. Gratitude flooded her face as she sat down, whispering a soft thank you that Daniel barely heard over the noise of the bus. He nodded, already gripping the overhead rail as the bus moved again. What Daniel didn't notice was the man sitting across from him. He was older, dressed simply but neatly, with calm eyes that missed nothing. He'd watched the exchange without judgment, without expression, but something in that small act lingered with him. In a world where kindness had become rare and often conditional, he had just witnessed it given freely by someone who clearly had very little to spare. The bus rolled on. Daniel stood the rest of the way, legs trembling slightly, hunger gnawing at his stomach. When he finally stepped off, the cold air hit his face, sharp and sobering. He walked toward the construction site, only to find a notice taped to the gate. Work canceled for the day. Budget cuts. He stared at the paper for a long moment, the words blurring as disappointment washed over him. No work meant no pay. No pay meant another night of stretching leftovers and another knot tightening in his chest. He turned away, unsure where to go next, when a voice stopped him. "Excuse me." Daniel turned to see the man from the bus approaching him. Up close, he looked ordinary, no flashy suit, no entourage, just a quiet presence and curious eyes. "I saw what you did on the bus," the man said calmly. "Giving up your seat." Daniel shrugged, uncomfortable. Anyone would have done the same. The man smiled gently. Not anyone. They walked together for a few minutes, exchanging small talk. The man asked about Daniel's day, his work, his family. Daniel answered honestly, not knowing why he felt so at ease. He spoke of Lily, of being on his own since her mother passed away 3 years earlier, of trying to balance grief and responsibility with no safety net. When Daniel finished, he realized he'd said more than he usually did to strangers. The man listened without interrupting, nodding slowly, as if every word mattered. Before they parted ways, the man handed Daniel a business card. It was simple, just a name and a number. "If you ever need help," he said, "call me." Daniel looked at the card, confused. "I don't really, just promise me you will," the man said, his tone kind but firm. Daniel slipped the card into his pocket, thanked him, and walked away, not knowing that the name on that card belonged to one of the most powerful businessmen in the country, a self-made billionaire who had built companies from nothing and now spent his days searching for something money could never buy. Weeks passed. Life didn't suddenly improve. If anything, it became harder. Daniel sold his old guitar to pay the electric bill. He skipped meals more often. Lily noticed and tried to hide food from her plate for him, which broke his heart every time. One evening, as Daniel sat at the small kitchen table, staring at a final eviction notice, he remembered the card. His hands shook as he dialed the number, shame burning in his chest. It rang once, twice, and then Daniel, the familiar voice said, "I was hoping you'd call." The next day, Daniel found himself in a building so tall it made his neck ache to look up. He felt out of place, his worn clothes stark against the polished floors and glass walls, but the man from the bus greeted him like an old friend. They talked for hours, not about charity, but about values, about integrity, resilience, and the quiet strength it takes to remain kind when the world has been unkind to you. The billionaire saw something in Daniel that no resume could show, a man shaped by hardship but not hardened by it. He offered Daniel a job, not a handout, not a favor, an opportunity, a position managing logistics at one of his companies, with training provided, a stable income, benefits, a future. Daniel cried, not the loud, broken sobs of despair, but the silent tears of relief that come when a weight you've carried for too long is finally lifted. Months later, Daniel no longer took the bus to uncertain jobs. He walked Lily to school every morning in a coat that fit, his shoulders straighter, his eyes lighter. Their apartment was warmer, their fridge fuller, their laughter louder. But the real change wasn't in what Daniel had, it was in who he had become. Confidence replaced fear, purpose replaced survival, and kindness, the same kindness that had once cost him nothing but a seat, now guided every decision he made. One evening, after a long day at work, Daniel and Lily rode the bus home together. It was crowded, noisy, and familiar. When an elderly man stepped on, struggling to stand, Lily tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered, "we should give him our seat." Daniel smiled, stood up, and took her hand as they moved aside. The man thanked them, and Lily beamed with pride as the bus rolled on. Daniel looked out the window at the city lights and thought about how close he had come to giving up, how one small act of kindness, done with no expectation of reward, had changed everything. Sometimes, life doesn't turn around because of grand gestures or loud moments. Sometimes, it changes because you chose to be kind when it was hardest, because you stood up when no one else would, because you remembered who you were, even when the world tried to make you forget. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the power of small choices and quiet kindness, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. You never know who might need to hear this today. And remember, your smallest act of goodness might be the moment that changes someone's life forever.